Hello, everyone. Welcome to Courageous Custody, your weekly dose of empowerment and practical guidance. I'm Renee Rodriguez, creator of the Custody Blueprint, divorce mediator, and parenting coordinator.
And I am Audra Tarfa, a level 3 trained internal family systems practitioner and co-founder of the Global Trauma Institute. And I'm happy to be here with you again as we continue to understand how these unique challenges that protective parents face in the courtroom need to be equipped. That's our mission here, with strategic thinking and emotional support to help you navigate the difficult journey with strength and resilience.
So every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we're going to go live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, bringing you inspiration and insight from stories about courageous parents who have walked in your shoes and emerged victorious in big ways and small, and practical strategies from us to help you advocate for your children and manage your trauma as you go through your custody case. So let's dive in. So we are not giving legal advice or therapy.
And if you're feeling triggered, we want you to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Today's topic is how to show the family court that your ex is an absentee parent. And this is something that, could be something that was more historical. And now that you have a custody battle going on, they are, very present, or as present as they have the ability to be. Or it can be something, right, that it continues on. But family courts tend to define parenting in terms of custody orders and financial contributions, not emotional engagement. So when we're looking at various types of absenteeism, we're talking about things like that. They may miss visitations or show up inconsistently, for example. They might really just ignore their responsibilities. They're not helping out with homework or medical decisions or even extracurriculars. Who knows if they'll even take them, right? They might even use their role as a parent as a power play, showing up when it serves them, when people are watching them, when they're able to impress, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's an emotional presence as well as a physical presence that makes the children feel abandoned, really, even when that parent is there physically present, right? And the thing I think we have to keep in mind is the courts are still going to grant custody or visitation rights unless there is a clear pattern of neglect that is well documented.
Absolutely. That goes back to that evidence again. Evidence. I think you and I, we say it all the time, right? You have to have supporting evidence. And that is what the courts like to see, something that shows clear patterns that are well documented.
And yeah. No, I was just going to say I think we don't just also want to talk about the fact that this is sort of the children feeling that, when they're feeling that absentee parenting, I'm going to argue right now that when you have a narcissistic parent, that they're always going to be absentee emotionally, right? But I think we do also, we need to focus on the fact that also in the past, that there has been a history of it. And when we're working with our clients, we try to show a particular way of doing it, because the family court, honestly, there are two types of parents that they're looking to give custody to: a good parent and a good enough parent, right? Showing up occasionally is good enough for the court, right? They don't, in the emotional inconsistency doesn't matter. And honestly, they might see the protective parent's frustration as gatekeeping, parental interference, trying to interfere, right? Parental alienation. And so judges, and look, it's the law. So what are they going to do? But it's the legal presence over the emotional absence. So you have to gather the evidence. We cannot say enough documentation that the other parent is unreliable. But I know you always talk about the importance of it, really. We're talking about what we need in court, but the other important part is what goes on inside.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what you just said there is really key, right? The judges prioritize legal presence over emotional absence. And oftentimes what we see is we want the judge to care about the emotional absence. It's these parts inside that go, hey, judge, to be quote unquote fair, Don't you want to talk about how this parent is emotionally absent? Not that they're just there showing up, but they're not attuned, they're not this, they're not that. And that's how it often affects the parts inside of the protective parents when they're
Oh,
parent. It really activates, it can activate some really deep wounds, especially if they are a parent themselves who, as a child, felt some sort of neglect, right? So if the child is suffering because there's witnessing, the parent is witnessing neglect, that situation can often trigger parts inside that obsessively sort of track missed visits, which is good, right? It's good to track those things. But then let's sit with that and just have that as information, not sort of a record of wrong so that that can come out later in court and be like accusatory, right? It's just, this is information that we need, and we can respond to help our child out in the courtroom by having this documentation, not to have something to weaponize. We want to try to stay away from our manager parts wanting to weaponize things. That's what that narcissistic co-parent does. We don't have to participate in those types of things. And though there might be parts inside that are feeling rage and frustration or despair when the court doesn't see the truth, but having that documentation and being able to show patterns is really going to help sort of tone down and help those parts inside that really want that justice. Because we hear that all the time. There's this sort of sense of justice because these exiled parts that are really holding the sadness of their own abandonment and their own neglect, they don't want to see these wounds mirrored or duplicated inside this, inside the family system for the child. So that the goal is to really work with these parts inside so that there's this feeling of dismissiveness isn't internalized as and can come off as combative or angry or high conflict, so that those emotions can be weaponized. Really just documenting for evidence and information to be able to show a pattern later on.
yeah, because the way you show up, the court is very much judging that. And when it comes to that documentation, it's very important that you prove absentee parenting in a particular way in court. For example, you really want to document the missed parenting time. We can get some amazing patterns. We had a client recently, Erin, who showed, and she just went right through and showed all of the times that the parent didn't show up and how those patterns were. It was always on Fridays and Saturdays. It was always these days that they missed the calls. They missed that kind of parenting time. They missed other kind of parenting time, but they were seen on the internet having a good time that night, right? So we want to show that they've missed it. We want to show how they've missed it if we can, which isn't easy, but when it's there, you want to document that. Creating a visitation log. This is so important. You do want to keep track of every scheduled visit versus every actual visit, right? That's one of the things that the custody blueprints visitation log does. You can use some of the court approved apps like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents or, App Close to show inconsistent communication as well, right? Just doesn't answer things for a long time. The child's being held back. No decisions are being made. Try to gather witnesses. Third parties are almost more important than even what you're gathering in terms of hard evidence. Having that third party come in who does not seem biased, like teachers and coaches, sometimes even family members, although they are more often than not taken to be biased, they can confirm though a lack of involvement, not showing up for important games and recitals, etc. You always want to save text messages, even though everybody's used to me saying, don't text, get off of text, get onto email, but save those emails too, so that you can show these patterns in that visitation log of last minute cancellations, no shows, or just even dismissive behavior, right? At exchanges, it may be that the child's excited to share what happened at the recital and the abusive co-parent can't be bothered to listen to it, just wants to shuffle them into the car, right? But I think it's also important to show how it affects the children. Look at the medical records, look at the school records. You want to document that they aren't at the doctor visits, that they aren't at the parent-teacher meetings, that there's just a lack of participation all around. And you do want to take note of your child's emotional state. I'm not going to lie, this is really a hard one to get the court to appreciate. right? The child's emotional state is usually just, as a he said, she said type of thing. But so you want to look for specific changes in behavior. Sure, there's anxiety. Sure, there's sadness. But I always say, it doesn't matter if you come in and say our child's very anxious, our child's been very sad or depressed. You're not going to be believable. What you need to do instead is to say there's regression here. There's bedwetting. They're pulling their hair out. They're pacing back and forth for about 40 to 50 minutes before or after transitions. You want to show specific things rather than label it something. But you can also get statements from therapists or school counselors. We have had clients all throughout. I know you've probably seen some of these as well, Atra, who have drawing samples, writing samples from kids.
Mm.
The kiddos are expressing sadness and anger at the absent parent. Those are incredibly powerful in court. And I'm always going to say, work carefully with your strategist or your lawyer, especially if there are a lot of them, to make sure that it doesn't then come back on you as if you're alienating the child to be writing these things. But if it happens, especially in school versus at home, I find those to be the most powerful things. But, you just want to be careful, because once you have all of this and you get in court, you can't get emotional about it. You have to stick to the facts, not feelings, and you can't be talking about any of this without evidence. Judges have to have legally documented proof over verbal claims, because that's just he said, she said.
Yeah.
And of course, you're overcoming that your narcissist is becoming very performative and I just want to be with my children and these things were accidents. But honestly, even though they're just showing up, even sometimes, you still want to have your documentation to show what's really going on.
Absolutely. We really want to make sure that the children are supported through this absentee parenting. And the way that we do that is to validate their emotions, not by that bad mouthing the other parent. Yeah, like it's that person XYZ. We don't want to blame, name, shame, any of that. Just really want to stick, but you know what? That's got to be hard for you to deal with. Like I hear that sounds like that was difficult for you today. And really validate their emotions without bad mouthing the other parent. Continue to encourage, consistent support systems. Like Renee just mentioned, the teacher or the school counselor, or even the teachers or a trusted adult like a coach. These are support systems that are going to be in the child's life as a third party on a day-to-day basis. So encouraging consistent support from those systems are going to really help support the child through these absentee parenting moments and model emotional stability so they don't have to internalize that absentee parent's neglect as their fault or something that they did. Really proving like the absentee parenting requires strategy, it requires patience and emotional regulation, because courts don't always acknowledge emotional neglect, right? But as Renee said, with that proper documentation and with the ability to respond and not react, you can really build a strong case while protecting your child's well-being. All right. Oh, Renee, I think, are you on mute or I just can't hear you?
Can you? Here I am. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yeah, I can hear you.
So that's it for this week's episode. There's a lot there, of course, to digest, a lot to plan for, but that's all we've got for today for Courageous Custody. Before we go, thank you so much for joining us, whether live or on replay. We are so grateful to have helped in any way that we may have. We have some great takeaways for this week. Document the history, document all the goings on that are absentee. Go into court making it about building the co-parents' relationship rather than blaming them for not showing up, even as you are showing that they're not showing up, and support your child when absentee parenting continues.
Yeah, I love that. Build versus blame. I really appreciate that. Next week, join us again at 7 p.m. Eastern. Like or follow us, bookmark us so that you can get the notifications and not miss anything, because what Renee and I are talking about might catch you right when you need it.
Yes, so leave your own comments below, ideas for what we could talk about for sure. And wherever you're listening, remember, you're not alone. Until next week, stay strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for what matters most. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.